It's the most important phrase in any relationship, particularly during lockdown. I have a nephew who had been naughty. His mother said to him, "You need to say you're sorry." And he didn't want to do this. He said, "Sogger." "No, say you're sorry." "Sogger." This Mexican standoff continued. "Sogger." "No, sorry." And so it went on until sorry was reluctantly squeezed out of the lad. Why is it so hard to say sorry? Whether it's to a housemate, a partner, a significant other, a work colleague, a friend, and so on. Why is it so hard to say, "I was wrong and I'm sorry"? Of course, saying sorry takes courage. But why is the phrase so hard? Well, firstly, you could talk about self-justification. We want to justify ourselves. We want to show that our intentions were right. We compare ourselves to others, or we say, "You were worse or just as bad." Sometimes we meant what we said, but now we're saying, like a politician, "I misspoke." That's self-justification. Then there's the kind of win-lose paradigm that exists. We don't want the other person to be smug or build up a record that helps them, quote, win next time. We have a win-lose paradigm. We don't want them to be able to say, "Well, you have a record here, you've done it before, you must be doing it now. You always do things this way." We don't want to hear that. It feels like losing. Then there is an aspect of shame to this. We don't want the embarrassment, the shame. We don't like the shame of being wrong. Not necessarily guilt, just shame. Shame has social consequences, and we don't want to be in the doghouse. Then there is the aspect of the power dynamic that's taking place. We don't want to give power to the other person. The phrase "I am sorry" is hard because the other person might lord it over us or not forgive us. And we hate that feeling more than secretly knowing we were in the wrong or holding a lie. In short, all of this is about pride. Psychology has much to say about this. Why are apologies so hard for those who aren't used to giving apologies, who've never practiced saying sorry as a habit? Those who are non-apologists, as it were. For people who don't know how to say sorry, saying "I'm sorry" carries all kinds of psychological ramifications that run far deeper than the words themselves might imply. It's a bit like not being able to admit you've lost an election. That's right, I went there. It perhaps threatens a sense of identity. It elicits, for those who can't say sorry, fundamental fears, either conscious or unconscious, that they desperately want to avoid. Firstly, the admissions of wrongdoing are incredibly threatening for non-apologists because they have trouble separating their actions from their character. If I did something bad, I must be a bad person. If I was neglectful, I must be fundamentally selfish and uncaring. If I was wrong, I must be ignorant or stupid. Do you see what's going on there? The actions say who you are to the person who doesn't know how to apologize. They feel threatened that it's having to say that in my core being, I am this way, I am this horrible kind of person. Psychologists say that, therefore, apologies represent a major threat to someone's basic sense of identity and self-esteem. Apologizing for many non-apologists might open the door to guilt for most of us, but for people who struggle to apologize, it can instead open the door to shame. Guilt makes us feel bad about our actions, and often that's a healthy thing. But shame makes non-apologists feel bad about themselves, who they are. And so shame becomes this toxic emotion. And in a relationship, the cry goes up, "You never admit you're wrong." And that's because being wrong is, quote, "for losers." to quote a certain world leader. Apologies are opportunities, though, to resolve interpersonal conflict. But non-apologists may fear that their apology will only open the floodgates to further accusations and conflict. Once you admit to the wrongdoing, surely the other person will pounce on the opportunity to pile on all the previous offences for which they refuse to apologise as well. And there may be patterns of a behaviour of not apologising, and the person who can't apologise is afraid that that pattern will become weaponised in the hands of somebody else. It will be used against them in a court of law, as it were. It's a bit like admitting you stuffed up to your boss at work. He or she has the power of the annual review that decides on your promotion. He's making a list, he's checking it twice, he's going to find out who gets the promotion. Non-apologists fear that by apologising, they lose. They alone are the culpable party. If you're arguing with a spouse, for example, the non-apologist might fear that an apology would exempt the spouse from taking any blame for a disagreement, despite the fact that each person in an argument or disagreement, in a lot of cases, has at least some responsibility. This is what I call owning up to your 20%, 30%. You pick a number that's less if it gets you to apologise. By refusing to apologise, those who struggle to apologise are trying to manage their emotions. They're often comfortable with anger or being irritable or emotional distance. And sometimes they find it hard to experience emotional closeness. I can be a little bit that way myself sometimes. And vulnerability feels extremely threatening. People who are non-apologists fear that lowering their guard even slightly will make their psychological defences crumble. And this in turn could open the floodgates to a well of sadness and despair that will pour out of them. And they might be correct. However, they are incorrect in assuming that these deep and pent-up emotions, as long as they get support, love and care when they do, that these will be traumatic and damaging. In fact, opening up in such a way is often incredibly therapeutic and empowering, and it can lead the person to experience far deeper emotional closeness and trust towards the other person. So, what am I saying in all this? Saying sorry is really hard, isn't it? It strikes at the heart of the cool self who never puts a foot wrong, the perfect partner who is always on top of things, the efficient, career-focused self who is taking care of business and is on a positive career trajectory. The self who, like the politician, can't bear to say, I stuffed up and I will try to put things right. The justifying self who, having failed, tries to distract by saying, oh, well, but who is my neighbour? That's the question, surely. Why does that person who says that to Jesus say that? because they want to ask about their neighbour's identity, and they had a neat list with who he could tick off and justify himself, who he's loved. He wanted a tidy control of his life, and Jesus doesn't let the lawyer away with it, of course, if you know the story. The found out self. This is the person who always blames someone else. We don't like being that person who's been found out, being caught with our hand in the cookie jar, as it were. They cause a problem. It's not my fault, they say, which is exactly, of course, what Adam said to God in the Garden of Eden. God blamed Adam. Adam blamed Eve. Eve blamed the serpent, and the serpent didn't have a leg to stand on, of course. I would imagine that most of us at some point can identify with those different kinds of behaviors in our own lives. The reason? Pride. Next time we're going to talk about not being a doormat, and also some ways to overcoming our non-apologizing self. As we close, let's listen to some of the words of the story of the prodigals. Imagine yourself firstly as a prodigal being forgiven, the younger son, being welcomed home. Then as you listen to this, switch to imagining yourself as the older brother, being invited to forgive your brother, but also needing to say sorry to dad and sorry to your brother for the resentment that you've shown towards them through perhaps many years. Being forgiven and saying sorry. Learning to forgive is tied into being forgiven. So let's reflect on ourselves as we listen to this. When the younger brother finally came to his senses, he said to himself, "At home even the hired servants have food enough to spare, and here I am dying of hunger. I will go home to my father and say, 'Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I am no longer worthy of being called your son. Please take me on as a hired servant.' So he returned home to his father, and while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him and kissed him. His son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I am no longer worthy of being called your son.' But his father said to the servants, 'Quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet. Kill the calf that we've been fattening. We must celebrate with a feast, for this son of mine was dead and has now returned to life. He was lost, but now he is found.' So the party began. Meanwhile, the older son was in the fields working. When he returned home, he heard music and dancing in the house, and he asked one of the servants what was going on. 'Your brother is back,' he was told, 'and your father has killed the fattened calf. We are celebrating because of his safe return.' The older brother was angry and wouldn't go in. His father came out and begged him, but he replied, 'All these years I've slaved for you and never once refused to do a single thing you told me to. And in all that time you never gave me even one young goat for a feast with my friends. Yet when this son of yours comes back after squandering your money on prostitutes, you celebrate by killing the fattened calf.' His father said to him, 'Look, dear son, you've always stayed by me, and everything I have is yours. We had to celebrate this happy day, for this your brother was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, but now he is found.' How the older son responds, we don't know, but the call to receive grace and from that place be gracious to others echoes down through the centuries. Amen.